Here's what you need to know about the book of Lamentations. While it's not wildly popular in Christian circles, Jewish communities read it every year as a way to commemorate their suffering. The Hebrew title is Ekah, which means how, and it comes from the first word in the book, how lonely sits the city. Our title, Lamentations, comes to us from the Greek and the Latin titles. The author has traditionally been thought to be Jeremiah, but the book itself does not specify. Now, the book is about the destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of Babylon in 587 BC. Ancient warfare was warfare by siege, which means the army would surround the city and cut off food supplies, leading to devastating and horrendous consequences inside the city. That's what Lamentations is talking about. It's a horrifying and terrifying scenario. Like so much of the Old Testament literature, Lamentations is a book of poetry, and it has some unique features. One is the Hebrew acrostic. This means that in each line or each paragraph, the poet moves through the Hebrew alphabet from beginning to end. It's a way of saying the suffering is complete from A to Z, as it were. There's also a unique meter. The first line is a bit longer than the second line. This was a well-known device in both the Bible and the ancient Near East for funeral songs. It's a way of mourning and limping along. The book is comprised of 5 chapters, with the heart, both structurally and theologically, being the middle chapter, chapter 3. Chapter 3, verses 21 through 24 are the sole flicker of hope that God is faithful. In fact, the hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness," takes its line directly from that section. Now, here's what you'll get out of reading Lamentations. There are several lessons. One is the language of sorrow and suffering and grief. It gives us language for that expression. Second is it forces us to wrestle with some really tough theological questions. Why is the suffering in the world so great? Why does it seem so extreme at times? Third, it tells us about the seriousness of sin. Now, we have to give a caution here, because while Lamentations is about God's judgment of his people, not all sorrow in the world is God's judgment. Sometimes it's just the effects of a world subjected to the curse of sin. But fourth and finally, the lesson we take away is that God is faithful. Even though it appears that he is angered by sin in Lamentations, there is always hope that he is a God who is faithful to his covenant. His steadfast love endures forever. In fact, that word steadfast love is a Hebrew word that means covenant faithfulness. Finally, how can you read the book as a Christian? Well, in the language of Lamentations, we want to hear the suffering Christ. You see, God is so faithful to his covenant that even though people fail to keep covenant with him, even though they violate the covenant, he still determines to make a way by entering time and space and fulfilling the obligations of the covenant, by being crushed by the demands and the curses of breaking the covenant. Christ dies on the cross so that God can restore his people. So take a minute. Just a few minutes, that's all it'll take you, and read Lamentations, and I think you'll be rewarded by it.